Thousands of injuries and nearly 100 deaths result from workplace violence in California each year. Workplace violence causes profound physical and psychological damage, and the loss of time, money, and reputation can cripple and sometimes destroy an organization. Workplace violence is a serious problem, and it's up to all employees to do their part to prevent it. To combat workplace violence, the state of California has enacted SB 553. The bill requires annual training to ensure that all employees can identify workplace violence, understand the potential threats that exist in their jobs, and effectively report workplace violence incidents. California defines workplace violence as any act of violence or threat of violence that occurs when an employee is involved in work activities. It includes, but is not limited to, the threat or use of physical force against an employee, or an incident involving the threat or use of a firearm or other dangerous weapon against an employee. These acts need not result in injury to be considered workplace violence. If an act has a high likelihood of injury, psychological trauma, or stress, then it is considered workplace violence. Workplace violence is divided into 4 types. Type 1. Workplace violence committed by a person who has no legitimate business at the worksite and includes violent acts by anyone who enters the workplace or approaches workers with the intent to commit a crime. Type 2. Workplace violence directed at employees by customers, clients, patients, students, inmates, or visitors. Type 3. Workplace violence perpetrated by a present or former employee, supervisor, or manager. Type 4. Workplace violence committed by a non-employee who has or is known to have had a personal relationship with an employee. Examples of workplace violence include, but are not limited to, following or stalking, sending inappropriate or unwanted telephone calls, texts, written correspondence, or emails, bullying or singling out persons with abusive behavior such as verbal abuse, profanity, vulgarity, teasing, or taunting, harassment or discrimination because of race or any other reason, sexual harassment or sexual assault, verbal or physical abuse by customers, animal attacks on employees when they are engaged in work duties, texts that threaten violence from a spouse or partner while at work, physical or verbal intimidation or deliberately causing fear, vandalism or destruction of personal or organizational property, possessing unauthorized weapons in the workplace, sabotage of work operations or equipment, threats of physical harm, physical attacks such as biting, choking, grabbing, hair pulling, kicking, punching, slapping, pushing, pulling, scratching, or spitting, intimidation or physical harm with a weapon. Lawful acts of self-defense or defense of others are not considered workplace violence. This destructive conduct is not limited to your organization's employees or isolated to your organization's property. It can take place anywhere employees work, such as a customer's location, and by anyone they encounter while working. A large percentage of workplace violence incidents come from coworkers. Because employees spend so much time with their coworkers, they are often the first to notice concerning changes in behavior and can help to identify concerns. Some of the most important signs to look for include an unhealthy and unusual infatuation with guns and violent incidents in the news, extreme mood swings, paranoia, depression, or suicidal thoughts, holding grudges and blaming other people for troubles, a new or increased use of drugs or alcohol, a history of domestic abuse, threats, assaults, or other violence, extreme overreactions to criticism, and the inability to accept responsibility for even the smallest mistakes, a recent history of expressing rage, making threats, or announcing violent plans via social media accounts, repeated violations of work policies, a recent increase in absences and tardiness, or a decrease in the quality of work performance, a disregard for safety procedures, an increase in accidents, or an increase in needless risk-taking, a recent lack of interest in hygiene and personal grooming habits. Workplace violence incidents such as bullying, harassment, verbal abuse, and intimidation are also warning signs of more serious potential violence, such as physical assault or murder. Coworkers who display one or more of these behaviors are not necessarily on the verge of committing an act of workplace violence. However, when these behaviors are different from the norm, are getting worse, or are accompanied by threats and violence, they should be reported immediately. The identity of the employees who report issues will be kept confidential whenever possible. When management or human resources is alerted to a problem, they can assist at-risk employees with counseling or medical solutions that could avert disaster and save lives. In California, employers are prohibited from retaliating against employees who report workplace violence or who seek support from law enforcement or emergency services. This means managers and employees cannot punish or discipline employees for these actions. While there is no guaranteed way to predict or prevent workplace violence from happening, there are things you can do to make your workplace safer. Read, understand, and follow your organization's workplace violence prevention plan. Never participate in toxic behaviors such as bullying, harassment, or discrimination, and treat coworkers with dignity and respect. If you are a witness to or victim of these behaviors, report them right away. Openly and honestly communicate with coworkers by carefully listening to their ideas and concerns. Resolve conflicts quickly and fairly before they escalate, and seek assistance or training from management to solve particularly difficult conflicts, and encourage coworkers to do the same. Seek assistance or training to manage stress and watch for the signs of stress in coworkers. Alert management, security, or human resources if you are a victim of domestic violence or stalking. Reporting can be uncomfortable or embarrassing, but 27% of all workplace violence incidents stem from domestic violence, so staying silent puts everyone at risk. Report any occurrence of domestic violence or stalking that you witness at your organization's facility or elsewhere during work hours. Trust your instincts and make sure you are never alone with anyone who makes you feel uneasy. This applies to customers, vendors, contractors, or even coworkers. The same goes for dangerous situations, whether in your workplace or at a customer, vendor, or supplier location. If something does not feel quite right, then leave at once. Immediately report to security unfamiliar persons, suspicious behavior, or any persons, including coworkers, who are in unauthorized locations. Report any sighting of a weapon at your workplace or at customer, vendor, or supplier locations immediately. Never assume that the person has a concealed carry permit or a reason to have the weapon. Make sure that exterior doors to facilities remain locked whenever practical, and that secure doors are never left unlocked, propped open, or held open for someone unfamiliar. Be sure to leave in pairs to reduce the risk of a robbery or assault when leaving the workplace late in the evening or when the workplace is in a high-risk neighborhood. Immediately report any safety concerns to your manager, human resources, or security. Your organization may be completely unaware of a potentially dangerous situation. Inform law enforcement immediately when behavior is criminal in nature or suggests an imminent threat of violence. When confronted by an emotional or irrational coworker, customer, vendor, or anyone else, there are specific techniques that can keep you safe. Speak calmly, never raise your voice, and offer to have another person moderate the dispute if necessary. Apologize to the person and sincerely listen to grievances. Never tell aggravated or irrational people that they are wrong. Remain non-confrontational by standing to the side and not directly in front of the person, and by keeping arms low and non-threatening. Never violate personal space with a shove, push, or punch, even if the person has become physically or verbally threatening. This behavior often escalates into a more serious situation. Employees who are assaulted should not fight back unless there is a risk of sustaining serious injury or death. A physical response could get the victim in legal trouble or make the situation worse. The best reaction is to leave the scene immediately and seek help. Active shootings represent a very small percentage of overall workplace violence incidents. However, their effects are so devastating that all employees must understand how to improve their chances of survival if they are caught in such an incident. Active shooters can come from anywhere and could be employees, ex-employees, disgruntled customers, or even completely random individuals with no connection to your workplace. Most active shooters are not capable of empathy or reason and are attempting to kill as many people as possible before they are killed themselves or otherwise stopped. The best strategy to survive is to run without hesitation as fast and as far away from the shooter as possible. If your escape is blocked, you are injured, handicapped, or are assisting an injured or handicapped person, then the next best option is to hide behind a large object that provides protection from bullets and shields you from detection. If your hiding place has been discovered or you have no place to hide, then your only option is to fight. Without hesitation, attack the shooter using a sharp or heavy object if one is available. Fight only if the options of running or hiding are not possible. However, when you fight, it must be with aggression. Doing nothing will get you killed. Plan ahead and make a mental note of escape routes and objects to hide behind at locations where you work on a regular basis. Memorize your organization's active shooter emergency action plan so that if an incident occurs, you can react quickly and effectively. Employers are required to write a written workplace violence prevention plan that is easily accessible to all employees at all times in all work areas. The plan must include instructions on how to report incidents, threats, or workplace violence concerns to employers or law enforcement. It must explain how reports will be investigated, how the results will be communicated, and how the organization will respond to violent incidents, threats, or concerns. Employees must be included in the development and implementation of the plan. Employees must be trained when the plan is established, and then annually thereafter. New employees must be trained upon hire. Additional training is required if a new workplace violence threat or hazard is identified, when there are changes to the plan, or when employees are transferred to a new role with new hazards. Employers must record every workplace violence incident in a violent incident log, and employees have the right to view and copy these logs. The logs will contain detailed information about each incident, including the actions taken to protect employees from the threat and the consequences of the incident. Both employers and collective bargaining representatives can petition for temporary restraining orders for employees. Temporary restraining orders may be sought for employees who have endured harassment, unlawful violence, or credible threats of unlawful violence in the workplace. The law allows for employee names to be withheld from temporary restraining orders. This anonymity will encourage employees who fear reprisals to seek help. Violence, bullying, threats, and intimidation are not tolerated in any workplace. Perpetrators of workplace violence of any type could face disciplinary action up to and including employment termination, and in serious cases, arrest and criminal prosecution as well. With over 2 million incidents reported annually, workplace violence is a serious problem that affects both the mental and physical health of all employees. Murders, assaults, bullying, intimidation, and threats all have a profound impact on the workplace, and understanding how to lower the risk of becoming a victim is the responsibility of every person in every organization. While there is no way to completely shield yourself and your organization from violence, following California requirements will greatly reduce the risk and may even save a coworker from serious injury or even death.